My name is Muriel Fox, and I have something to say. Thousands of years, people said that's the way it's always been. Men rule the world, and women's sole pleasure and responsibility is to raise future generations. And we have proved in our lifetime that this doesn't have to be the case, and that the world is better because it's using the talents and the energies of women who have so much to contribute to making this a better world. We always took it for granted that this is how it had to be, that women were subservient to men, and that a woman's job was to be a wife and mother. And my mother hated it. She was not a good housewife. It was just the wrong job for her, and I felt so sorry for her. And I was just determined that there had to be a better way in life for women. That there had to be other options. And I just wouldn't take for granted anymore people saying, I'm sorry, we don't hire women, we don't rent to women. And in our lifetime, we changed that. And young people can make more changes. They have to understand it is possible after all those thousands of years. I always wanted to be a newspaper reporter. In fact, I wanted to be a labor columnist. But the newspapers were folding left and right. So there were no jobs when I came out of Barnard College. And so I got into publicity. First, I got into advertising, actually, and then publicity, because that's all the jobs that there were. But there were no women in either field except for secretaries. I was a good writer, and I guess I had gumption and confidence in myself, and I just did what had to be done. And when I was told we don't hire women, I went away and went to another smaller publicity agency. But then I heard there was an opening in the radio and television department at Carl Bayer, which was maybe the world's largest public relations agency at that time. And I came back and I just frankly did a very good job and worked day and night. There was a man in the department who was earning more money than I was. And but he went home every night on the 5 o'clock, 5:15 train. And so when my boss, head of the department, was made head of all the departments, he chose me to head it. And I was flabbergasted and terrified. And the president of the firm said, well, Muriel, you've come very, very far, very fast. We'll see if you come too far. And so I was determined to prove that I did my job. And I always, frankly, did a very good job and always worked day and night to do the job well. I didn't really understand that I could until I met Betty Friedan and read The Feminine Mystique. And every time I walked down the street with Betty, a woman would come up to her and say, you changed my life. And she changed the world. And I get very upset when people never heard of Betty Friedan. Uh, so this is part of it. And then when I introduced her to American Women in Radio and Television, and she spoke about her book, I said, well, we need an organization. She said, you mean an NAACP for women? Yes. And I sent her a thank you note after she spoke and said, if you ever have such an organization, I'll do the public relations. So in 1966, I was on Betty Friedan's Rolodex, and I got a form letter saying they'd founded this organization to be called Now. And and I immediately asked for 200 applications to give to all my friends in radio and television. And then she called me up and invited me to her home and said she wanted me to do the publicity. It was so exciting. We knew we were changing the world. There was no doubt at the founding conference of Now on October 29, 1966, that the world would never be the same. I wrote the press release, and the newspapers picked it up, put it on the front page of major newspapers. Some historians say we were ignored. We weren't ignored. They knew this was history. And I think all the people who worked on it knew we were going to succeed. We didn't think we'd succeed so fast. And I think the reason we did succeed so fast was because hundreds of thousands of women and men took up the cause, and they worked for something that made them mad. Whatever upset them, whatever, that's what they worked on. Each person, their own labor union, their own college, their own town, their own company worked on what made them mad. And so we had all these little victories. And then we had really brilliant people who got the major victories of getting the laws changed and the laws enforced. And these people should not be forgotten. History must not forget them. And in my book, I talk about 30 people, 29 women and one man, who history should absolutely remember, who made a huge change in the world. Most important was jobs. To be told we don't hire women, that was really what we had to change. And we had to change the laws, we had to get the laws enforced. The ads in the newspaper said help wanted male, help wanted female. Today's people can't believe that that was the case, but it was the case. And that's really what made me most mad. Then also, I remember in New York Now, I said, let's have a demonstration because the Plaza Hotel won't admit women in the Oak Group for lunch. So we had a demonstration, and it was ultimately successful. So everybody worked on what made them angry, and in some cases, it was a lot of things that made us angry. It was very hard. I didn't get enough sleep. Uh, and that just went on for years. And I think that's true for every woman. But at the same time, we can do it. We can combine all these things if we're willing to sacrifice some of our comforts for the years when it's necessary. Also, frankly, I was very fortunate. I had a supportive husband. We were married for 48 years. I have to say, we never had one argument in all those years. We just supported each other. And my husband, Dr. Shepard Aronson, was the first uh, chairman of New York Now. And when people would say, Shep, what's a doctor like you doing in the women's movement? He'd say, I want my wife to make more money. Well, Betty Friedan was proof that you don't have to be perfect to make good things happen. She was maybe the most imperfect person you could imagine. She had a very bad temper. She was hostile, impossible to work for, frankly. But Betty Friedan is the one who did it. She conceived of Now. She gave us our name, our initials, and the energy. And she went around the country recruiting very smart people to work on the movement. Betty Friedan is the one who did it, but it shows you don't have to be even a good. At Betty's memorial, I said Betty Friedan was not a good woman, but she was a great woman. And you don't have to be a good person, let alone a great person or a perfect person, to make a difference. Well, at Betty Friedan's memorial, I at one point I said, maybe hostile people make the best revolutionaries. And Gloria Steinem said to me later, no, kind people can make revolutionaries too. And Gloria Steinem proved that. She is a kind person today, has always been generous with her time, and proves that good people, nice people, can also create change. I'm so happy that today people do say, I am a feminist. I think it's because they're so angry about abortion rights. And also because some of the leaders, Beyonce and others, are saying, I am a feminist. But there was a long period of time where really it was the F word. And people couldn't say it in their job. They couldn't say it if they wanted to have a date with a man. They couldn't say, "I'm a feminist." But today, again, what is a feminist? A feminist is just a person who believes that people should be judged by their own value by their own accomplishment, by their own potential, rather than being one half of the human race and being assigned a certain role. I do see a resurgence because it's so necessary and because I think women have more confidence that we can do it. If others did it in the past, they can do it too, the young people. And I think that is a resurgence. Today, we have to succeed in politics. That's the answer. I did research recently for my book, and all these wonderful victories we had, every one of them we got with a completely democratic Congress. We probably wouldn't have won those victories as strong as we were if there were not politicians supporting us. And people today have to concentrate on politics. That's really the name of the game in this century. If we succeed in electing a Congress that is friendly to feminism, the ERA can pass tomorrow. When it was passed originally, they added an amendment that has nothing to do with the ERA amendment, saying that it had to be ratified by 38 states within 7 years. It has been ratified by all 38 states, but it's taken longer than those 7 years. But that's not part of the amendment. That's not part of the Constitution. So if we have a friendly Congress, they can pass it tomorrow. And there are people who understand this who are working for it, and I think that can happen. And if not, if we didn't get that, we'd have to go back to the states, and we have to get friendly politicians elected in the state legislatures again. And that's very important too. We have to understand that politics right now is the name of the game. Veteran Feminists of America, which was founded in the 1990s, is dedicated to telling the story of what we accomplished in the feminist movement and what people can accomplish following our example and understanding how we did it and how it's possible. And I wrote the book partly to support the goals of Veteran Feminists of America. And I just want to say also that NOW is the organization that did it. In other words, our feminist revolution began with the founding of NOW in 1966. Before that, sure, we had Simone de Beauvoir, we had important, and later we had consciousness raising, all very important. But it was the National Organization for Women, NOW, that got the laws passed, that got the lawsuits won, that got the laws enforced. And most people in Veteran Feminists of America, incidentally, are members of NOW. And we all work together. We have to tell the story. In my book, in Unfinished Business, the last chapter, I talk about childcare, which is essential, and of course, getting abortion rights back. But also, we have to bring back the labor movement and make it strong, because the labor movement is the reason we had a strong middle class in this country. And the attack, the government attack, and I think Ronald Reagan really turned the tide against labor, is what has created so much inequality today. And for women especially, women now are in service jobs, and that's a very good potential for the labor movement to expand. But it's essential that we understand that we have to build a strong labor movement. And today, the people in poverty, most of the people in poverty are women and their dependent children. And again, if we had a strong labor movement where they could turn, I think uh, inequality could be overcome. I wanted to write the book because I was so angry, first of all, about losing abortion rights, and also how many young people today Never heard of Betty Friedan, never heard of Now. Can't believe that we used to have laws that said help wanted male, help wanted female. Can't believe that women couldn't have a credit card in their own name. And if a woman was single, she couldn't get a credit card. Or if she was married, it was in her husband's name. And if she got divorced or he died, she lost her credit card. We have to tell that story, first of all, so people can understand how difficult it was and how we overcame, and so they can overcome too. Well, I'm very proud of it. And it's called The Women's Revolution: How We Changed Your Life. And I wrote it at the age of 94 in 1 year, working day and night. People have to know what we did because then they know what they can do, following in our footsteps. And I'm very proud of this book. And again, I'm proud because it pays special tribute to 30 people, 29 women and one man, who should go down in history. They deserve to be in all our history books. My book is the most complete discussion and story about what we did that created this revolution. What we did, the laws we passed, the demonstrations, the consciousness raising, everything that changed the world forever. I believe my book describes the lawsuits, and maybe most important of all, it talks about these 30 people who made a difference, and history must not forget them. And we don't see them in the history books. They must be in our history because they changed life forever for all of us and throughout the world. It started with the birth of Now, in my opinion. Sure, there was a lot that happened before that, but the birth of Now is really what kicked off the women's revolution. Well, it reinforced, going back through history, how difficult it is and how imperfect all idealistic movements are. And unfortunately, how they destroy each other and their goals by fighting. And I just look at the fights we had and I feel so sad. And the movement was so imperfect. And we really could have had the ERA. We could have had childcare if we'd worked together instead of fighting, making demands that the other one must be perfect or the other one must agree with us. And it's really a shame, but this has happened throughout history. I don't think we have to be anti business. Business leaders can be our partners, just as men have been the partners of women in our revolution. And a lot of the business leaders understood this. I remember when the now Legal Defense and Education Fund, which is now called Legal Momentum, honored the CEO of AT&T at our equal opportunity dinner. He said that the lawsuit, which AT&T lost to Now, where they had to pay $3.5 million and change all their policies toward women, he said that was the best thing that ever happened to AT&T because it enabled them to utilize the talents and the energies of all these strong, talented women. And a lot of business leaders do understand that. So I think we work together just the way I think women and men work together as partners. And Betty Friedan always stressed that. There are some people in the movement who were anti men and talked about the male patriarchy. And certainly a lot of male patriarchs didn't want women taking away their privileges. But at the same time, I think today's young men understand that the partnership is good for everybody. I'm learning from young activists that there's energy again and that feminism is no longer the F word, and that they really respect what we did and what we still have to do. And I'm learning that the confidence is there. I mean, we never took for granted that we were going to be successful in our careers, in the world of arts, in the world of sports. We made all that happen. But now the young women today say, of course, they deserve it. And that's what I'm learning. I remember I took it for granted that the men in my agency were making more money than I was. And today's young women just feel, well, if I did a good job, I deserve to make the same amount of money or more if I'm better. And that's something we never thought about in our days. We just took it for granted that we were going to be oppressed. What makes me mad is that people don't realize how hard it was and what a difference we made after all those thousands of years. We changed the world. They can do it too. And I hope they will follow in our footsteps, carry on the torch, and they will succeed. One day they will succeed. I would say don't give up. It can be done. We did it, and it was very, very difficult, and we were so imperfect. So don't expect perfection, but fight on and work for the causes that you believe in.